No me amenaces.
No me amenaces tú a mí. Tengo fotos que demuestran que no estuviste en París.
인비저블 게스트는 한국 버전의 리메이크도 일찌감치 확정됐다고 합니다. 오리올 파울로 감독
does have several juicy nuggets in it. These were just a couple of them, so we look forward to that.
It's like one of these books, right? You're just...
안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탕왕호입니다. 오늘은 영어 학원도 갔다 오고 미용실도 갔다 오고 운동도 해야 돼요. 쭉 피곤한 하루입니다. 택배도 뜯어야 됩니다. 저기 택배가 3개가 와 있어요. 오늘 날씨 엄청 더웠죠? 그리고 또 무슨 일 있죠? 오늘 삼성전자 8만원 깨졌죠? 그리고 또 뭐가 있죠? 대방 2차 어저께 청약했는데 24만 명, 24만 개 청약 통장 거의 뭐 평균 경쟁률 700대 900대 1이었나? 뭐 그냥 이제는 청약이 되게 힘듭니다. 아주. 저도 이 아파트가 지금 청약으로 된 게 아니고 동탄이 마피였을 때 산 건데, 와, 이제는 뭐 마피는 이제는 뭐 보기 힘들 것 같아요. 그렇네요. 어쨌든 운동하겠습니다. 일단 스트레칭 위주로 하고요. 네, 팔굽혀펴기를 하도록 하겠습니다. 운동할 땐 쉬어야죠.
Wastefully towards the wall. The situation right across India is grave, verging on catastrophic.
Why do you think India has been hit so badly? I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional right now.
Saturday on CNN.
An emergency declaration in at least 4 states this morning over concerns about gas supply because of the cyber attack on a critical pipeline by a criminal group originating from Russia. Now, the attack exacerbates already strained relations between Moscow and Washington. CNN's Alex Marquardt got an exclusive look at exercises and war games with American and European forces amid this growing Russian aggression. And Alex joins us now. Alex, this is really interesting and out there for the world to see. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah, and it's coming at a really interesting moment, John. The U.S., along with its NATO allies and partners, have launched these large-scale military exercises all across Europe. They have been in the works for a while, but the fact that they're coming at the same time as these heightened tensions between Russia, Ukraine, and the West is lost on no one. So we have spent the last few days traveling all across Romania, even going to North Macedonia, getting rare access from Special Operations Command in Europe to some of the most elite U.S. forces.
A team of U.S. Navy SEALs, rifles drawn, move quickly through the pitch black of a warehouse on the Black Sea. Laser sights, invisible to the naked eye, finding and taking out enemy fighters.
Hey, shoot her down, shoot her down. All right, let's go. Break up, break up, break up.
Tonight, the dead, wounded, and bullets are not real, but part of an elaborate series of NATO military exercises involving almost 30,000 soldiers from 26 countries.
It's just showing everybody that we have a capability and we can use it when necessary.
CNN got rare access to some of the most elite U.S. troops in the world. taking part in a unique training called Trojan Footprint. It is across Eastern Europe, working with forces from Spain, Georgia, Romania, Ukraine, and more. It could not come at a more tense time for this region, with Russia recently ratcheting up its aggression, sending tens of thousands of troops and a massive deployment of equipment to the border with Ukraine, prompting fears of an invasion and harsh condemnation from Europe and Washington. Back in Romania, this display of strength and cooperation clearly hoping to send a powerful message.
When we are strong, when we are united, it has a real chilling effect on, shall we say, the kinds of things that can happen. And so in this way, you cut down on the chance for mischief.
Even as Russia pulls back some of its troops from the land border with Ukraine, they've been stepping up their activities out here in the Black Sea. Their warships have been carrying out exercises. They've been harassing Ukrainian vessels and closing down parts of the Black Sea to other foreign ships as well.
The Navy SEALs lead the training in those waters, while Ukrainian soldiers practice alongside these American Green Berets, whose faces we aren't allowed to show.
When you talk to troops from other countries, like the Ukrainians, like the Romanians, how important do you think it is for them to feel that American support?
I think it's pretty significant. It shows that we're serious, working in exercises like Trojan Footprint. It is important whatever's going on around the world.
Which is why these massive exercises take place at sea, in the air, and on land.
Alpha 05, correction, 50 meters north, over.
A dynamic display of partnership and firepower, punctuating the loud message of a united front in troubling times.
34-1, good hits, target destroyed.
Now, military officials I've been speaking with over the past few days have been reluctant and hesitant to speak about this Russian threat on the record. But behind the scenes in private, they do admit that what they're seeing is quite worrying. One Romanian general who I spoke with, who is in charge of Romanian special forces, says those Russian maneuvers in the Black Sea, which is just a short distance from here, are a real concern. And as a result, he says his forces have to train harder and harder to be prepared for anything. John?
All right, Alex Marquardt, really interesting to see this. And I think the Americans and European allies want the Russians to see this as well. So very interesting. Thank you. The controversial Kentucky Derby winner set to run in the Preakness this weekend. What the trainer is now saying about his horse's failed drug test. Kind of a stunning reversal.
Plus, a tiger on the lamb in Texas. You're welcome, John Berman. It's his favorite word when there's animals on the loose. But anyways, this is something we're keeping an eye on, and we have big cat expert and Tiger King star, yes, Carol Baskin, with us next hour.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
Our engine continues, our impetus and momentum.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. Give me the facts on voter fraud.
There has never been a moment where voter fraud has affected the outcome of an election.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
This theatre will be filled with people and art and debate and energy. And so now we have to rely on the two of us.
How interesting is it to be Tyler Mitchell today? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
There seems to be some confusion, and maybe you can clear up. Where are the US forces in Syria going?
And fully understand what's at stake.
What's happening now in the world is a great thing because people are talking about subjects they never did before.
Alan Vaughan, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN. business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world. No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief. So let me just put it to you straight, Senator. Senate Democrats, they're getting their butts kicked.
No nonsense.
Are you simply shooting the messenger because you don't like the message?
Facts first.
How stupid do you think we are? Allies in Washington are covering for him, and they shouldn't get away with it.
Because getting to the truth matters.
The Washington Post went and confirmed the date of that hearing, so you're telling me unless I go back in the time capsule, you're not going to believe it.
Aaron Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
I'm Sam Kiley in Delhi, and this is CNN.
I'm John Berman alongside Brianna Keeler on this new day. Liz Cheney's last stand, her impassioned plea for truth on the House floor, hours before the vote to remove her from Republican leadership.
And new body camera video of the death of Andrew Brown Jr. in North Carolina. Attorneys for his family calling his killing by deputies unequivocally unjustified.
New this morning, the Biden administration making a push to fully reopen schools before the fall. The education secretary joins us live.
And this isn't your everyday house cat. The search for a Bengal tiger on the loose in a Texas neighborhood, and Carol Baskin is here to weigh in.
States and around the world. It is Wednesday, May 12th, a pivotal moment this morning for the Republican Party and, frankly, for the United States of America. In just a couple of hours, House Republicans will vote to strip Liz Cheney of her leadership position. Why? Because she refuses to promote the big lie that the election was stolen. The lie that Joe Biden was not freely and fairly elected. She won't do it. She won't lie. And she's losing her job because of it. Now, Cheney may be on her way out, but she's not going quietly. Last night, she was striking a defiant tone in his speech on the House floor.
Every one of us who has sworn the oath must act to prevent the unraveling of our democracy. Remaining silent and ignoring the lie emboldens the liar. I will not participate in that. I will not sit back and watch in silence while others lead our party down a path that abandons the rule of law and joins the former president's crusade to undermine our democracy.
Joining me now to discuss this is former Trump White House Communications Director Alyssa Farah. Alyssa, you left the administration in December because you told me that you were concerned that the then president was misleading the public about the election. He was lying to them about the results of the election, and you were concerned then that it might lead to violence. So what are your feelings this morning as you watch Liz Cheney being pushed out of her leadership position for refusing to lie?
Well, John, great to be with you, and thank you for having me. Listen, this is just a strategically unwise move by the Republican Party. When you lose an election, the last thing you should do is look back on the election and repeatedly relitigate it. The last thing we should be talking about right now is the election that Republicans lost. We should be focusing on the midterms and what the Republican Party is actually for. And I would pose this question to your viewers and to the broader American public. How many actual Americans even know what a House Republican conference chair is? This is a Washington fight internally on Capitol Hill that has no bearing on the American public. And it's a shame. It's not what the House Republican Conference needs to be voting on. And I would assure you this, it's actually just going to make the midterms a bigger challenge. Republicans are not going to win back the House by winning, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz districts. They're going to win by winning moderate, D+1, D+2 districts with independents and even with some swing Democrats. And they don't do that by continuing to carry on this myth that the election was stolen.
Liz Cheney said on the House floor last night she's concerned that the former president's continued lies about this, and frankly, Republican leadership's acquiescence to those lies, could lead to more violence. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's certainly something to consider. We all saw what happened on January 6th. We shouldn't assume ever that that can't happen again. We need elected officials to roundly and continually condemn it. And I give a ton of credit for Liz Cheney because she's putting her legacy and doing the right thing ahead of what is actually more beneficial to her career. She realizes she'd rather be remembered in the history books as telling the truth when others wouldn't, and I give her credit for that. But again, this is just entirely the wrong focus. A couple weeks ago, you'll remember Senator Tim Scott gave the response to Joe Biden's first address to the joint session of Congress. He talked about what Republicans are for: prosperity for all, economic inclusivity, a strong national defense. And what did the House Republican Conference take from that? Oh, we need to unsit Liz Cheney, who's in a strongly Republican-held district in Wyoming. It's just entirely the wrong focus. And this is at a time, by the way, when our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel, is being pummeled with rocket attacks. We have civilian deaths. We have a pipeline in Georgia that's been hacked in a major cyber breach. We have skyrocketing gas prices. We have large unemployment, 10 million people still unemployed. And by the way, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. Why this is what we are doing right now is just bizarre and makes no sense.
I wonder what you think is in store for Liz Cheney over the coming days and weeks. And I ask you this in particular because when you came on and talked to me in January, condemning the big lie, condemning the lies about the election, after you talked to me, you received death threats. So, talk to me about that and what's going to happen to Liz Cheney.
Yeah, and that's something that anyone who speaks out in these very divided times in our country is potentially going to be subjected to. I think women often come against those threats even more. Mine were scary, they were violent in nature, and obviously I reported them to the authorities. I hope that Liz Cheney does not receive those. I would not be surprised if she did or if those around her do. But it should be a lesson to all of us why we need to just tone down the rhetoric. There is room for disagreement within the House Republican Conference, just as there is room for disagreement within the Democratic Conference. This is what I just does not make sense to me. Liz Cheney is absolutely entitled not only to her opinion, but these facts that she is stating, and those can coexist with any other beliefs that we want to within the conference. But when you're trying to marginalize people for telling the truth, you do subject them to dangers and to threats, and I hope that's not what she faces, but I commend her for doing the right thing for the country.
You say tone down the rhetoric, and you full well know that it is your former boss, who he's not on Twitter anymore or Facebook, that's a whole other thing, but he's putting out these statements. We did an analysis of him every day. More than half of the things that he puts out in his blog are lies about the past election. And given how you feel about what he was saying when he was still president, how do you feel about that that is what he continues to put out every day?
I don't give it, frankly, all that much thought, and I would actually encourage Leader McCarthy to kind of look at the former president's statements, much like Leader Mitch McConnell does, which is, we don't really need to give them the time of day. We need to focus on governing for the American public. Americans have mortgages to pay. They want to get students back to school. They want to pay for their kids' college. That's where the focus needs to be, rebuilding this economy, coming back from the pandemic, not what you're hearing come out of Mar-a-Lago from the retired former president.
Listen, you talked about women being subjected more or treated differently when they take stands maybe than men do. What role do you think Liz Cheney's gender has played over the last 2 months in her position, the strength, the solidity of her position in House Republican leadership?
Well, I'm biased, but I find that women tend to have stronger backbones than men. But no, I being serious, I do think that you subject yourself to even more criticism and certainly backlash from a darker corner of whether it's the internet or elsewhere when you're a woman taking a leadership stance. I'm sure I'll have some very beautiful Twitter mentions after this, but it certainly plays a role in it. But I give her so much credit for being that voice as a woman standing up within the conference. She's an important voice. She will have a future in this party because leaders tend to thrive and rise to the top. But I commend her for putting, what's right for the country and telling the truth ahead of her career.
And I do want to give you 1 second here just to talk about Elise Stefanik, who will, by all accounts, replace Liz Cheney, even though there are some members of the Freedom Caucus who aren't happy about that. You're a big fan of Elise Stefanik.
Oh yes, Elise is somebody who I think extremely highly of. Very similar to Liz Cheney in the sense that she's a serious policymaker. She's not just a cable news talking head, which unfortunately